In the morning, citizens, welcome to today's news and guidance for Thursday, October 2nd, 2025. Coming at you live from a street food vendor at the World Expo 2025 in Osaka. Let's look at today's items.
It's quite the scene out here. A pleasure to be navigating the noise here in Osaka. I'm Matter, and I'm ready to unpack this, well, pretty substantial stack of sources we have today.
And I'm Phigistifus. We've cracked open the NAG15-10.02.25 stack. And for you, the learner, this brief is a chaotic but I think critical snapshot of 2025. This isn't just about what happened today. It's about synthesizing three distinct and frankly volatile forces. We're talking the cutting edge of technological architecture, these severe fractures appearing in global political landscapes, and, well, the intense local pressures happening right here in Osaka as it scrambles to host the world.
Yeah, our mission today is really synthesis. We are diving deep into those technical foundations, asking some hard questions about who controls the data pipelines,
Right.
and connecting that struggle for control directly to the human cost of rapid development, particularly the situation unfolding right here in Osaka. It all ties together with, well, surprising speed and sometimes unfortunate predictability.
Before we really get into the guts of the data, though, a quick word for our partner. Our sponsor this week is, once again, Small Batch Steve.
Good stuff.
Seriously, if you need flavor that stands up to anything, from a mild marinade to a full-on backyard smoker situation, you have to try their killer BBQ rub survival seasoning.
It really is killer.
Find it at shop.espaspeed.com. Go check them out.
All right, let's begin our deep dive where the real infrastructure wars are being fought. Segment 1 focused on the architecture of data and the quest for control.
Okay, let's unpack this. The biggest technical headline today, I think, is the emergence of a proposed next-generation data format, F3. This comes straight out of the Carnegie Mellon Database Group.
CMUDV.
And they're proposing this as the future columnar data file format. But maybe start with the basics. Why do we even need a new format at all? Aren't the current ones okay?
That's the critical question, right?
Yeah.
If you are training AI or running large-scale analytics today, you are using established standards, mainly Parquet and ORC.
Okay.
These are columnar formats, meaning they store data columns together, not rows. This makes analytical queries vastly faster than, say, traditional row-based databases. They are absolute industry staples.
So if they're staples, what's the problem? What is F3 trying to solve?
Speed and evolution, basically. The sources make it pretty clear. Parquet and ORC, while efficient for what they were designed for, are starting to struggle.
Struggling how?
They're struggling to keep pace with the massive demands of modern hardware, think faster SSDs, different CPU architectures, and, crucially, the specific evolving demands of large machine learning workloads. We're pushing hardware way beyond what these, let's face it, decades-old formats were really designed to handle efficiently.
And F3's proposed solution sounds, well, genuinely radical. It's not just a faster compression algorithm or something simple like that.
No, not at all.
The core innovation is its extensibility hook. F3 embeds WebAssembly, or WASM decoders, directly into the file. What does that even mean?
Exactly. So for you, the listener, WASM WebAssembly is essentially a compact, secure execution environment. It allows small programs to run extremely fast, almost like native code, but in a safe sandbox.
Okay.
By embedding WASM decoders right in the data file, the F3 format allows developers to implement entirely new, optimized encoding and compression schemes in the future, without having to fundamentally rewrite or fork the core format specification every time.
Ah, I see.
It ensures the data format itself can evolve dynamically alongside hardware advances or new algorithmic needs. Think of it like future-proofing the format itself.
From an engineering standpoint, that sounds like a massive win. Efficiency, longevity, great. But immediately, the sources say, alarm bells went off across the technical community.
Oh, yeah. Instantly.
We are talking about a significant security and trust conflict here, aren't we?
This is the core dilemma of, well, maybe this whole era. Efficiency versus risk. Data pipelines are the absolute foundations of every major corporation, every government agency. They're critical infrastructure.
Right.
So when you propose mixing static data storage with the capability to run executable code, even in supposedly sandboxed environment like WASMU, you introduced novel and, frankly, profound supply chain risks.
It's a fundamental change in trust, isn't it?
Completely. If a bad actor somehow manages to poison a WASM decoder that gets embedded in a data file, well, they no longer just manipulating data. They could potentially be executing code right inside your critical systems. The community concern highlighted in the sources is palpable, and you know what? It's absolutely warranted. It's a huge step.
It's interesting how centralized control always seems to wrap itself in the language of security, and that theme control versus autonomy flows directly into our next technical point, this push toward centralization from massive platforms.
That's Google's announcement, yeah. They're discontinuing the legacy check mail from other accounts, POP functionality.
POP, I remember POP.
Right, Post Office Protocol. And the related Gmailify extension, too. Both are going away starting January 2026. For those who used it, POP was kind of the older, more decentralized way to pull mail from different servers into one central inbox. It gave users flexibility.
So why is Google pulling the plug on this flexibility now? Security.
They cite a shift toward modern, more secure standards, which, invariably means standards that give Google more centralized control over the flow and access points of that data. Removing POP means they dictate how you access and manage your mail more tightly, cutting off those legacy routes that prioritize user choice and maybe easier external integration. It's a subtle but, I think, profound erosion of user flexibility, all in the name of modernization and security.
But the beautiful thing about the open source world often is that every centralized push seems to be met by some kind of distributed counter-movement.
Exactly.
And juxtaposing Google's move perfectly is the stable release of Image 2.0.0.
What is Image? Image is precisely the opposite philosophical position. It's an open source solution designed specifically for self-hosting your photos and media servers, like running it on your own hardware at home.
Okay, so local control.
Its entire appeal is absolute privacy and local control. Image 2.0 introduces features like better metadata handling, robust sharing options, and just general stability improvements that position it as a truly mature, viable alternative to services like Google Photos or Apple iCloud.
So it gives people a real choice.
It provides a means for the average, maybe slightly technically proficient user to actually regain ownership of their most personal data, their photos, their videos, bypassing the big cloud providers entirely.
It's the user basically saying, look, if the efficiency of the centralized cloud means sacrificing control and privacy, maybe I'll take on the technical overhead of self-hosting.
Exactly. And that quest for efficiency isn't just a matter of philosophical preference either. It's a multi-million-dollar imperative when you're dealing with expensive AI hardware.
Right. Which brings us neatly to that research from Hazy Research in Stanford on GPU utilization. Why are we suddenly talking about how well software uses the hardware? Seems obvious, no?
Well, it's obvious, but the scale is different now.
Yeah.
It's because the hardware is just ruinously expensive. GPU's graphics processing units are the absolute engines of modern machine learning.
Okay.
If you are a major lab or a corporation investing tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars in GPU clusters, the cost of that hardware, sitting idle or being inefficiently utilized by poorly optimized software, is simply enormous.
Yeah.
Astronomical.
Right. Wasted cycles are wasted money, lots of money.
Exactly. The research highlights that every single part of the software stack, from the data format itself, which F3 hopes to address, remember, all the way up to the training framework, must be aggressively optimized.
It's not just a nice to have anymore.
Not at all.
Yeah.
The difference between, say, 90% utilization and 70% utilization on a large cluster can translate directly into millions of dollars in wasted computation time when you're training one of these massive new generative models, for instance. Inefficiency is now a critical business risk.
Okay, moving from these sort of architectural blueprints and efficiency drives to active threats, let's look at the current security flashpoints. The sources reveal some pretty serious risks hitting fundamental infrastructure tools that basically everyone depends on.
Yeah, the Red Hat security incident is a really chilling example of supply chain compromise. Red Hat confirmed that hackers successfully breached its internal GitLab instance.
GitLab, so that's where they keep their code.
Exactly. GitLab is where code repositories are housed. Often the core build instructions and the actual source code for foundational Linux distributions like Red Hat Enterprise Linux are managed there.
So if a core infrastructure provider like Red Hat gets compromised at that level, the source code management level, what specific attack vector does that open up? That sounds bad.
It enables a classic supply chain attack. Malicious code could potentially be injected into foundational software before it's even built and distributed to the world.
Wow.
Given how widely Red Hat software underpins enterprise servers, government systems, everything globally, this incident is a severe wake-up call regarding the fragility of the digital foundations we all rely on.
And it wasn't the only fundamental vulnerability hitting the news, was it? We also saw the disclosure of a new security hole in curl and libcurl.
Curl, yeah.
These are kind of the silent workhorses of the internet, right? used by nearly every application under the sun to fetch and transfer data over networks.
Absolutely. When tools this ubiquitous, this fundamental, are found vulnerable, it's a moment of collective digital holding of breath. Everyone uses curl, often without even knowing it.
Yeah.
The widespread deployment means the patching effort required is massive and urgent. It just reinforces the idea that complexity is security's greatest enemy, and even the most common, seemingly simple tools require relentless scrutiny.
Now, connecting back to that theme of user control we saw with Image versus Google, there was also a major ruling in the Netherlands regarding Meta, Facebook, and Instagram.
This one is significant, yeah. The court ruled that Meta must give users a genuine choice. They have to allow users to opt out of algorithmic personalization.
Opt out. So see a feed without the algorithm deciding everything.
Basically, yes. Up until now, the default and often the only option has been content curation driven heavily by engagement metrics, which, let's be honest, are driven by maximizing ad views and profit.
But doesn't that Meta ruling just open the door to endless legal wrangling? Why is it considered such a win for user autonomy? It seems like just one court case.
Because it forces transparency and, crucially, choice. It directly challenges the notion that these complex, profit-driven engagement algorithms must be the default setting for everyone. It establishes a legal precedent, at least within the EU zone, that the user actually has the right to experience the platform without that layer of engineered reality applied. It says their autonomy, their choice, should be prioritized over Meta's optimized metrics.
Which links directly back to that efficiency versus ethical choice conflict we were talking about with WASM, doesn't it?
Perfectly. It's the same tension playing out in a different domain.
And finally, in this tech segment, just a reminder that security risks aren't just digital anymore. They're increasingly entering our physical urban airspace.
Indeed. The Amazon delivery drone crash reported in Tucson, Arizona. Apparently, 2 drones collided with a construction crane.
Ouch.
It's a stark physical manifestation of the logistical and, well, safety challenges inherent in coordinating low-altitude urban air traffic. We're trying to integrate this hyper-modern, algorithmically driven delivery system into existing city infrastructure that includes things like, static construction cranes.
Yeah, things that don't move.
Exactly. It really underscores that the safety protocols and the coordination needed for automated urban logistics are still very much in beta. We're figuring this out as we go.
Okay, that wraps up our technical deep dive. We've seen the technical fight for control over data, efficiency versus risk. Now let's look at how those same kinds of forces, maybe efficiency versus human cost, play out across the broader geopolitical map in segment 2. Stress fractures in the global landscape.
Right. This segment synthesizes the political, economic, and humanitarian instability points that jumped out from the source material, starting with the immediate domestic strain back in the United States.
Yeah, the major domestic news is the ongoing federal government shutdown. The source material is very clear about the core catalyst this time around.
What is it?
The dispute is centered squarely on healthcare funding. This isn't just abstract budgetary drama. It's a fundamental policy fight over essential services.
And this time, there seems to be a very dangerous, very real-world pressure point that might force lawmakers to the negotiating table faster than usual.
What's that?
The source material highlights critical shortages of air traffic controllers. And these aren't just potential future problems. They're apparently already translating into increased safety risks in the national airspace now.
That's serious leverage. When a political stalemate starts directly impacting air travel safety and logistics, well, the public pressure on the gridlocked parties becomes intense, fast.
Absolutely. It elevates the risk calculation for every single legislator involved. It's not just numbers on a page anymore.
And this domestic instability, the shutdown, the inflation, it's having clear ripple effects on consumer behavior too, isn't it?
Yeah, the sources note the impact of rising inflation and just general costs are visibly shifting American vacation habits.
How so? Fewer trips. Not necessarily fewer, but different. Instead of expensive international flights or high-end resorts, the trend noted is towards budget accommodations motels, maybe Airbnbs, and significantly, road trips. More driving, less flying.
It's an interesting and pretty immediate barometer of domestic economic anxiety, wouldn't you say? People are still taking time off, clearly, but the spending model is being severely constrained by rising costs and just general uncertainty.
Yeah, belt tightening. And politically, there was also a fascinating snippet about electoral strategy.
Oh.
We observed an effort by a Democratic candidate appealing directly to the political base, often referred to as Trump country.
Interesting move. How?
using language specifically designed to resonate with that audience, while, and this is the tricky part, simultaneously criticizing the former president and positioning themselves as his potential successor.
Wow, threading a needle there.
Exactly. It's a very calculated attempt to try and break through those hardening ideological barriers using a very specific narrative toolset. We'll see if it works.
Okay, let's transition now from the political maneuvering to the very real humanitarian and environmental consequences of some of these pressures. This is where funding disputes and policy choices hit home with often devastating effect.
The crisis in Mississippi sounds profoundly alarming based on the sources. The state continues to grapple with extremely high infant mortality rates.
A long-standing tragedy there.
Exactly. And this existing crisis is now compounded by these national political discussions we just mentioned concerning the potential nationwide reduction of Medicaid benefits.
So you see the political gridlock over health care funding at the federal level directly threatening the stability of the essential safety nets needed to address a critical ongoing humanitarian disaster in a specific state.
It's a very clear, very cohesive, and frankly, very grim story of policy breakdown impacting the most vulnerable.
And moving globally, the source material also included a reference to a powerful media piece focusing on the famine conditions and food shortages in Gaza.
What was the angle?
The analysis mentioned was centered around the use of visualization techniques, charts, maps, data representations used to illustrate how Israeli actions, specifically military operations or blockades, may have contributed to those famine conditions.
Right. And as always, we need to be clear. We are impartially reporting on the content of the source material here. The source emphasized the use of data visualization as a tool to try and convey the complexity and the alleged contributing factors behind the shortages.
And it really shows the increasing importance of visual data in conveying complex, often highly charged humanitarian narratives, trying to make the abstract concrete.
Okay, on a completely different, maybe more cultural note, amidst all this political chaos, there's a beautiful little nod to deep history in the sources.
What's that?
The final brief voyage for a 1,000-year-old Viking ship undertaken by conservators.
Wow, 1,000 years old. That must be quite something to see.
Incredible. It's likely the final maneuver needed for some specialized preservation work before the ship is moved to its permanent public display. Just a small, dedicated effort to preserve tangible history against the forces of time and, well, modern chaos.
And conversely, shifting from preserving the past to defending contemporary culture, we saw hundreds of celebrities, musicians, and writers relaunching a Cold War-era style advocacy group.
What's their focus now?
Their stated mission: defending free speech amid current concerns over censorship and, interestingly, algorithmic control, echoing that meta-ruling we just discussed.
So a collective effort pushing back.
Seems like it. It shows a growing, organized attempt to shore up what they see as core liberal values against various systemic pressures, both governmental and corporate.
And finally, on the environmental front, an important intervention happening down in Florida.
Coral reefs.
Exactly. Scientists there are actually introducing imported coral species from other countries, literally transplanting them to try and bolster the struggling local coral ecosystems.
That sounds pretty drastic, bringing in non-native species.
It is a direct human-assisted effort to shore up biodiversity, yes. And it really highlights the severity of the decline in the local Floridian coral populations. It's forcing scientists to look internationally for more resilient species, ones capable of surviving the current environmental stressors like warmer waters and ocean acidification.
A sign of desperation, perhaps, but also adaptation.
And just quickly, on a much lighter note, purely for cultural awareness, the sources mentioned Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, was discussing his upcoming film, The Smashing Machine.
Ah, the MMA fighter story.
That's the one. He apparently shared some thoughts on its deeply personal connections to him. Just a brief moment of celebrity news woven into all this complexity.
Okay. That brings us, geographically and thematically, to our most concentrated area of focus today, the city we are currently in. Let's zero in on segment 3, the price of progress, local spotlight, Osaka, Japan.
Yeah, we started this dive talking about global technical demands, things like massive data centers and GPU efficiency. Now we see those very demands translated into huge infrastructure projects right here in Osaka.
And we need to examine the complex tension this creates between this huge investment, the push for a clean image for Expo 2025, and the severe social impact that often results.
Let's start with the infrastructure boom. The AI aspect is staggering. SoftBank Corp has a monumental plan
Monumental is the right word.
to convert the former Sharp display panel facility in Sakai, which is essentially part of the greater Osaka metropolitan area, into a huge 150 megawatt AI data center.
150 megawatts. Just pause on that number. That is a colossal power draw for a single facility. What does that kind of investment signal about Japan's, and specifically SoftBank's, commitment to the global AI race?
It signals a massive, coordinated corporate bet. A bet that the future of economic growth rests heavily, maybe entirely for them, on having domestic AI infrastructure capacity at scale.
And it's not just SoftBank acting alone, right?
No, the project, which is scheduled to start construction in 2025, involves a joint venture with Sharp itself and also KDDI, another major telecom player.
So a synchronized effort.
Exactly. It's a coordinated push to create a major regional AI hub mirroring that GPU utilization efficiency drive we discussed earlier. You need these huge facilities ready to feed those power-hungry, optimized GPUs.
And powering that kind of operation requires equally aggressive energy planning. Which brings us to the forecast from Osaka Gas.
Right. They are responding directly to this anticipated industrial demand. Osaka Gas is forecasting a major capacity increase in their domestic thermal power generation.
How much?
They're aiming to go from 2 gigawatts up to 3.2 gigawatts by 2026. That is a 60% jump in just a couple of years.
Wow. Where's that power coming from? Renewables.
The specifics mentioned are construction, 2 new 600 milliW gas-fired units in Himeji, which is nearby, scheduled for completion by 2026. And there's already a third similar unit planned for completion by 2030.
So a clear long-term commitment to providing the necessary power, and it looks like primarily natural gas, to fuel this high-tech future they're building.
But the innovation here isn't solely in high-tech power and data, is it? The sources mention a solution to a critical, much more low-tech logistical problem caused by demographic shifts.
Ah, yes, the delivery driver shortage. It's a
Right.
huge issue across Japan.
And the proposed solution is, well, ambitious and uniquely Japanese, perhaps. A conveyor belt road project planned to link Tokyo and Osaka.
A conveyor belt road
Oh.
for goods.
Apparently. It sounds like a remarkable infrastructural workaround. Instead of directly solving the demographic crisis, the profound shortage of young workers available for jobs like delivery driving, they are proposing to automate the primary logistics artery between the two largest urban centers in the country.
Using infrastructure on a scale we usually only see in, like, specialized mining operations or massive factories.
Exactly. It shows just how profoundly these demographic pressures are reshaping national planning and infrastructure investment, thinking outside the box or maybe inside the conveyor belt.
And as for the Expo itself, the reason for much of this development push, there are some early metrics of success reported.
Yeah, the UAE pavilion has apparently been wildly popular, attracting over 3 million visitors since the opening back in April.
That's high traffic, high global visibility, and therefore very high stakes for the city's brand and image.
Which brings us to the inevitable flip side, the social costs and the intense pressure for image control. Hosting an event of this magnitude demands a certain polished look, right? And the city has already faced some image challenges, with the sources noting the temporary suspension of the water shows at the Expo. Why was that?
Following the detection of high levels of bacteria in the water features.
Okay, an image problem that, while maybe small in the grand scheme, needed immediate attention to protect the Expo's brand integrity. But the most critical social point in the entire source stack, I think, concerns a much more deliberate attempt to clean up the city's image by essentially erasing vulnerable populations.
This is the forced gentrification angle, yeah. The source material details the erasure, the planned demolition of a particularly destitute district, a district that housed the local Aran Labor and Welfare Center.
Aran. That area has a long history, doesn't it?
A very long history, often associated with day laborers and marginalized communities. And this community is now facing demolition following concerted police and legal actions against it.
The criticism here, as reported in the sources, is not subtle at all. It is explicit. This erasure is widely seen and criticized as a forced gentrification effort,
Designed specifically
to create a cleaner, more polished urban aesthetic for the high-profile World Expo that attracts those millions of visitors. What does this tell us about the priorities driving this rapid development cycle here?
Well, it tells us quite starkly that the value placed on the city's global image and the potential commercial gain derived from the Expo brand seems to vastly outweigh the value placed on this long-standing marginalized community.
Right.
The physical erasure of the Aran Center and the surrounding district feels like the ultimate expression of prioritizing short-term aesthetic profit, that clean image, over basic compassion and justice for the poor and vulnerable.
It's a really painful, concrete example of that development versus human cost equation, isn't it? Where the most vulnerable people are viewed not as citizens to be supported, but as obstacles to progress, obstacles to be removed.
Precisely. And that fundamental clash between profit, power, and principle is the perfect segue into our final segment today, connecting the dots in ethical guidance.
Okay, so we've established this pattern across tech, politics, and local development. A struggle between decentralized autonomy and centralized control, or between efficiency profit and human cost ethics.
Yeah, whether it's in WASM code, potentially enabling risk for efficiency, or Meta's algorithms prioritizing profit over user choice, or Osaka prioritizing image over a vulnerable community.
And the source material provides an interesting ethical reflection drawn from the Proverbs of Solomon that gives us a potential lens for analyzing these conflicts.
What's the core principle?
The thematic guidance introduced is, treasures of wickedness profit nothing, but righteousness delivereth from death. That's Proverbs 10.2.
Okay, treasures of wickedness profit nothing, but righteousness delivereth from death. Let's define the terms based on how the source contextualizes them. What does wickedness mean here?
It's not just generalized evil or bad behavior. In this context, it specifically refers to ill-gotten gain, things like seeking greedy gain, devising evil plans for profit, or, critically relevant here, oppressing the poor to achieve gain.
So actions motivated primarily by selfish interest and injustice, particularly when it harms others for profit.
Exactly. And righteousness, conversely, is defined pretty straightforwardly. Upright conduct, behavior conforming to ethical standards, acting justly.
Okay, and the guidance suggests that anything acquired through those unjust means, the treasures of wickedness, is ultimately temporal, fleeting, and worthless. It provides no lasting benefit, whereas just conduct, righteousness, is what truly endures and ultimately protects.
So if we take this guidance and immediately apply it back to the gentrification happening here in Osaka, the connection feels pretty sharp, doesn't it?
It does. The explicit criticism reported is that the erasure of the destitute Aaron district, the oppression of the poor residing there, is designed specifically to generate immediate profitable gains for the city and developers.
The gains being that cleaner image for the Expo, potentially higher property values in the cleared area.
Right. So using the language of the proverb, we have to reflect. Does prioritizing that short-term aesthetic and financial gain achieved by displacing and arguably oppressing the poor constitute prioritizing the treasures of wickedness?
If the motive is greedy gain achieved through oppression, the guidance warns pretty starkly that this kind of profit will ultimately amount to nothing of lasting value.
We can similarly apply this lens to the legal scrutiny of Meta's algorithmic curation back in the Netherlands. Why were complex, opaque algorithms applied by default, effectively restricting user choice for years?
The primary driver, arguably, was maximizing engagement and therefore profit, centralized control for corporate benefit.
So, we reflect again. Was Meta's approach, rooting its actions so heavily in maximizing profit, prioritized over what might be considered righteous judgment in this context?
Which would demand fairness, transparency, user autonomy, the very things the Dutch ruling seems to be pushing for.
Exactly. The ruling favors the latter righteousness over potentially ill-gotten algorithmic gains.
And finally, let's circle all the way back to the very beginning, the technical architecture, that F3 format, embedding executable WASM code. How does this first apply there? It seems more abstract.
Well, the lesson applies not just to the decision to use a technology, but potentially to the integrity of the system being built itself.
How so?
If that promised efficiency from F3 is achieved through a technical structure, like embedded executable code, that fundamentally introduces unmanageable risk, or worse, could allow for hidden exploitation down the line, well, that could be seen as a form of modern devising evil for the sake of gain.
So the efficiency gained might be ultimately corrupted if the foundation isn't sound or introduces unjust risk.
Potentially. The focus on internal purity and following good paths from the proverb could now be translated into ensuring the fundamental integrity and ethical foundation of the software and systems we're building. Are we building righteous code or code that prioritizes profit over safety and fairness?
The takeaway seems pretty clear then across all these disparate news items. Whether you are designing a data format or drafting a budget in Congress or planning a World Expo, the fundamental choice kind of remains the same, doesn't it?
It seems so. Is the foundation of your action built on pursuing short-term, potentially unjust gain? Or is it built on enduring principles of fairness and justice?
It's a critical challenge, especially in a world where speed and efficiency often eclipse careful scrutiny.
Definitely.
And that very speed, that drive for embedded intelligence and control, is what leaves us with our provocative final thought today. It builds directly on that conflict between code and control we saw with F3 and Meta.
Okay, where are we going with this?
We've seen F3 proposing to embed executable code directly into data itself. We've seen Meta being challenged on its unchecked algorithmic control over user experience.
Right. Both involve code-making decisions or having agency in new ways.
So the question for you, the listener, is this. As data formats and algorithms become increasingly powerful, maybe even autonomous, and deeply embedded with executable code essentially becoming decision-making entities in their own right, how do we ensure the righteousness of the underlying code itself, and perhaps more importantly, the intentions of its designers?
That's a deep question.
Because modern wickedness, to use the proverb's term, can now potentially be written directly into a system's architecture. It could be hidden inside a complex WASM decoder, or buried deep within a profit-maximizing algorithm that has unintended harmful consequences.
So the ethical choice is no longer just about the human transaction or policy decision. It's embedding itself into the very foundation of the technology being coded into existence.
Something to definitely mull over, a sobering perspective on the future of data integrity and algorithmic justice.
Indeed.
Okay, before we officially wrap up, let's select our clip of the day. What stood out most?
I think the most high-impact aha moment, especially for someone trying to grasp the forces shaping technology right now, has to be that collision of technical innovation and severe risk right at the start of our discussion.
You mean the F3 format?
Yeah. The discussion of the F3 data file format, which is proposing such a fundamental shift in how we handle data and tying that directly to the specific community concerns about embedding WASM, actual executable code, directly into critical data pipelines.
Because it perfectly captures that core tension.
Exactly. It perfectly captures the innovation versus trust conflict that seems to define so much of 2025. That's the clip, I think.
Excellent choice. Captures a key theme. All right, one last time, don't forget our sponsor, Small Batch Steve, seriously good stuff. Try their killer BBQ rub survival seasoning at shop.sp.com.
Thanks again for joining us for today's deep dive. We hope this synthesis helps you navigate the complexities of the week ahead.
Adios,